90% of people thought he was finished. A relic. But he stepped into the ring anyway. January 22, 1988. Convention Hall, Atlantic City. The air crackled with anticipation. A crowd of 22,000 people had gathered. Most of them believed this fight wouldn't last long. Larry Holmes stood in the center of the ring. He looked across at a 21-year-old. This young man wore no robe, no socks. His eyes seemed to bore holes through the space between them. They hadn't blinked since he left the dressing room. Larry Holmes knew what people thought. He'd read every article. He'd heard every sports analyst write him off. They saw him as an old legend, stepping into the path of something unstoppable. But Holmes didn't agree. He had said so, loudly and publicly. He had called Tyson's championship belts hollow. He had called Tyson's winning streak fake. He had stated on record that someone needed to teach this kid what a heavyweight champion looked like. Now, he was about to find out if he was right. This fight was more than just about Larry Holmes, at 38 years old, trying to reclaim his glory. It was about what happens when a man who built his entire identity on earned respect is told by someone he truly respects that his legitimacy was never real. Most fighters Tyson had faced before this night tried to beat him physically. Holmes chose a different path. Holmes tried to beat him with words, before the first bell even rang. He wanted to establish that the man across from him wasn't a true champion. That the title, the record, the fear Tyson generated, was just a product of carefully chosen opponents and an easy era. Not a true inheritance of the heavyweight throne. What Holmes didn't understand, what almost no one in that arena understood, was that you don't tell Mike Tyson his entire identity is a fraud. Not when you're about to step into the ring with him. The psychological consequences of that choice rippled through every round, every punch, every second of what followed. The long-term cost is visible in the fight footage. It's visible in what both men carried out of that building. And it's a lesson that has nothing to do with boxing. It's about the cost of dismissing someone whose entire life has been a fight to be taken seriously. The highlight reels don't always show the full story. On paper, Larry Holmes had one of the strongest cases ever made for a 38-year-old to fight a 21-year-old world champion and expect to win. Holmes' record entering this fight was incredible, 48 wins and just one loss. That single loss came in 1985, a controversial split decision against Michael Spinks. Accounts from that fight suggest it was much closer than the official scorecards showed. Holmes had held the IBF heavyweight title for 7 consecutive years. 7 years. To put that in perspective, when Holmes first won that title, Mike Tyson was only 14 years old. He hadn't even met his legendary trainer, Cus D'Amato, yet. The championship Holmes carried into that era wasn't borrowed. It was earned over decades of the most brutal work the heavyweight division had ever seen. He had beaten Ken Norton. He had beaten Ernie Shavers. He had stopped Muhammad Ali. That's a sentence you don't write casually. What most people don't know about this night is how carefully Holmes studied Tyson in the months leading up to the fight. His training camp had reviewed every single Tyson performance on record. They had identified what they believed were genuine weaknesses. They saw a tendency to pull straight back instead of rolling with punches. They noticed a predictable pattern in his left hook setup. They saw a vulnerability to right hands thrown late in combinations. At 38, Holmes wasn't a man in decline pretending to be capable. He was a man with a specific plan, built on specific evidence, confronting a specific opponent he believed he could beat. He was also bigger. At 6 feet 3 inches and 225 pounds, he was larger than Tyson's 218 pounds. He was the more experienced man. He was the man who had seen every style, absorbed every threat, and survived every pressure the heavyweight division had thrown at him for an entire decade. He knew he wasn't supposed to be an easy opponent. The walk to the ring told a story before the first punch was thrown. Holmes entered to a crowd that was respectful, but not electric. It was the kind of reception reserved for men admired for their past achievements. He carried himself with the calm of someone who had done this 49 times before. He had stood in these bright lights, under this exact pressure, and always found a way to win. There was no forced performance in him. He rolled his neck. He breathed evenly. He had told the press he wasn't afraid, and his body language confirmed it. He genuinely believed what he had been saying about Tyson. Tyson's entrance was different. It was a way that's hard to put into words, but impossible to miss on video. He didn't perform an entrance. He moved through the crowd like a person walks through their own home. No acknowledgement of the roaring atmosphere. No interaction with the noise. No adjustment to the scale of the room. His trainer, Kevin Rooney, walked beside him, saying nothing. There was nothing left to say. The pre-fight press conferences had been unusual, to say the least. Holmes had done most of the talking. He questioned Tyson's record. He challenged his championship credentials. He suggested that the fighters Tyson had stopped weren't representative of the true heavyweight division. He was specific. He was quotable. He was confident in the way only a man who truly believes his own argument can be. Tyson had said almost nothing in response, just enough to confirm he had heard every word. Inside the arena, the air carried a special electricity. It was the feeling of a fight where both men had something deeply personal at stake, where the outcome would settle an argument that was never just about boxing. The referee called them to the center of the ring. They touched gloves. Holmes looked directly at Tyson. Tyson did not look back. He was already somewhere else. The bell rang. Before we go any further, I want you to think about something real for a moment. Imagine someone with genuine credentials, genuine experience, stands in public and tells the world that the thing you have worked hardest for in your life, the thing that cost you the most, was never legitimately earned. They say it calmly. They say it convincingly, and then they agree to stand in the same room with you. What do you carry into that room? And is that version of you safer or more dangerous than the one they were prepared for? Comment below. I want to know what you think. Kevin Rooney, Tyson's trainer, confirmed it years later in interviews that received almost no attention outside of specialized boxing publications. During training camp, in the weeks leading up to the Holmes fight, Tyson wasn't running extra rounds. He wasn't practicing new combinations. He was doing something Rooney had never seen him do before, and never saw him do again. He was listening to a cassette tape. The tape was a recording of Larry Holmes' pre-fight interviews. Specifically, the interviews where Holmes called Tyson's championship lineage fraudulent, where he said the IBF title Tyson held was manufactured, where he said, with the measured authority of a man who had been heavyweight champion for 7 years, that someone needed to teach this kid what a real champion looked like. Rooney said that Tyson played this tape during training camp. Not before sparring, not before a workout, but every morning as the start to his day. What that detail means is worth sitting with. Tyson didn't need motivation in 1988. He was 20 years old, undefeated as a professional, the undisputed heavyweight champion, and already widely considered the most dangerous man in the sport. He didn't need a reason to fight hard. What Holmes gave him was something different, something more specific. A reason to fight with a particular kind of intent. Not just to win the fight, but to. Holmes, in his pre-fight campaign to establish psychological dominance, had made a tactical error so precise it almost seemed like irony. He had given Tyson a personal grievance. He had told a man whose entire identity was built on proving his legitimacy, a kid from Brownsville who was told he was nothing and became everything, that the thing he built still meant nothing. His own words, stated in multiple 1988 pre-fight interviews, claimed Tyson was a fake champion who beat nobody. Accounts from Tyson's camp confirmed that his mood and sparring changed in the final 2 weeks before the fight. He became, in Rudy's description, quieter and more dangerous than I had ever seen him. The tape stayed in Tyson's bag on fight night. He didn't need to play it again. He had already heard every word. Round 1 was a study in declared intentions. Holmes came out moving. The long, lateral movement of a fighter who intended to use the ring, who planned to make Tyson work for his angles, who was going to enforce the technical game plan his camp had built over months of preparation. He jabbed, he pivoted, he tied up when Tyson got inside. He was doing exactly what his corner had told him to do. And for approximately 90 seconds, it looked like a solid strategy. Then Tyson adjusted. What happened next is less visible than the result suggests. Tyson didn't rush. He didn't abandon his own technique in favor of raw pressure. He simply began cutting off the ring with a precision that the post-fight footage shows was methodical, not emotional. Sharp angles. Weight transferred correctly, forcing Holmes towards the ropes, not by charging, but by eliminating the exits one by one. When Tyson landed the first meaningful punch of the fight, a short right hand thrown between Holmes's guard as they broke from a clinch, Holmes absorbed it and moved away. And his expression in the broadcast footage showed something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite surprise. It was recalculation. The punch wasn't what he had prepared for. It was faster, and it arrived from a position his guard didn't cover. And the recalculation on his face was the face of a man updating his assessment in real time. Round 2 brought the pattern into clarity. Tyson was working the body. This is a detail that most casual summaries of this fight miss entirely. He wasn't trying to end the fight with headshots. He was systematically breaking down Holmes's ability to maintain movement, attacking the ribs and solar plexus with hooks that forced Holmes's elbows down, that slowed his lateral movement, that began the process of making the ring feel smaller than it was. Holmes hit back. He landed right hands that, in another era, against another opponent, would have changed the complexion of the fight. Tyson rolled through them. Not because they didn't land. They did. On record, they made contact. But because what Holmes was feeling in his fists, when they connected, was not what 49 previous opponents had felt. There was no give. There was no acknowledgement. Tyson absorbed the shots and kept working, as if the interruption was minor. By the third round, the crowd had gone quiet in a very specific way. The quiet of people watching something they understand, but cannot quite accept. Holmes wasn't losing because his plan was wrong. He was losing because the person in front of him was not responding to the plan the way the plan had assumed he would. Round 4. 1 minute and 51 seconds. Holmes was against the ropes on the south side of the ring. Tyson loaded a right hand. Not the thunderbolt that highlight reels compress it into, but a compact, mechanically precise right hand thrown off a left hook feint. Holmes's guard moved to cover it, half a beat too late. The punch landed on the jaw. Holmes went down. Not sideways, not backward. Straight down, folding at the knees, the way a structure folds when its load-bearing column gives way. The referee counted. Holmes rose at 8. He rose correctly. Hands up, eyes found. The posture of a fighter who was not finished. His corner would say afterward, on record, that he wasn't hurt the way the fall looked. That he got up because he genuinely believed he could continue. The referee didn't agree. The fight was stopped at 1:51 of the 4th round. Holmes's reaction in the post-fight footage was the reaction of a man not primarily processing pain. He was processing the gap between his certainty and the outcome. He had said publicly and at length that Tyson wasn't a real champion. He had said it based on genuine boxing knowledge, genuine experience, and a genuine read of what he believed Tyson's record revealed. He wasn't performing confidence. He believed it. Tyson's reaction, in his own words given at the post-fight press conference, was 3 sentences. He said, "I wasn't a real champion. I showed him what kind of champion I am. Now he knows." No celebration, no elaboration. The argument was settled, and Tyson didn't need to revisit it. Holmes, for his part, shook Tyson's hand at ringside. He was gracious in defeat, in the way that only a man with genuine class can be gracious. He said Tyson was the real thing. It was the confirmation Tyson had come for. Both men walked out of Convention Hall carrying something the scorecards couldn't measure. Holmes carried the particular weight of a man who was wrong about something he was very sure of. Tyson carried something closer to completion, not triumph, but resolution. The argument had been answered in the only language that was ever going to settle it. If you had been Mike Tyson, if everything you had built had been called fraudulent by a man with 48 wins and a 7-year title reign, a man the world respected, a man who genuinely believed what he was saying, would you have let it go? Would you have taken the rational position that your record speaks for itself? That the belt around your waist is answer enough? That a man's words before a fight are just words? Or would you have done what Tyson did? Kept the tape. Played it every morning. Carried it into the ring. And decided that the only acceptable answer was the one delivered in person. The rational choice was to ignore it. There was nothing to prove that wasn't already proven. But rationality has never been what separates the men who are remembered from the men who are forgotten. Think about that. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. The weight of unspoken words can be heavier than any punch. Larry Holmes carried a lifetime of accomplishment. He had earned his place in boxing history, punch by punch, defense by defense, victory by victory. He had faced legends and emerged victorious. He knew the grind. He knew the sacrifices. He understood the unwritten rules of the sport. And when a younger, explosive talent like Mike Tyson burst onto the scene, it was natural for someone of Holmes' stature to feel a sense of obligation. An obligation to uphold the standards. To ensure that the lineage of the heavyweight championship remained pure. Holmes saw Tyson's early fights. He saw the knockouts. He saw the raw power. But he also saw what he perceived as flaws. He saw a lack of the experience that came with years in the trenches. He saw opponents who, in his expert opinion, weren't truly testing the limits of what a champion could withstand. He saw a fighter being built up, perhaps too quickly, perhaps against the wrong kind of competition. And so he spoke. He spoke from a place of authority. He spoke from a place of deep understanding of what it took to be a heavyweight champion for an extended period. He believed that Tyson's reign was built on a less challenging foundation than his own. He genuinely believed that he, Larry Holmes, was the arbiter of true championship quality. He saw Tyson as a phenomenon, yes, but not as the legitimate heir to the throne he had occupied for so long. He saw a need to correct the narrative, to remind the world, and perhaps Tyson himself, of what real championship grit and endurance looked like. He thought that by questioning Tyson's credentials, he was doing the sport a service. He was forcing a conversation about authenticity. He was asserting his own earned legacy. But he underestimated the fire he was stoking. He underestimated the power of a young man who had fought tooth and nail for every single thing he possessed. Mike Tyson's life story was a testament to overcoming impossible odds. He had known hunger. He had known rejection. He had known the streets. Boxing was not just a sport to him. It was his salvation. It was the one arena where he could prove his worth, where the world could see that he was more than the sum of his difficult beginnings. When a respected elder, a figure he likely grew up admiring from afar, publicly dismissed his achievements as hollow, it wasn't just a critique of his boxing. It was a dismissal of his entire journey. It was a statement that his struggle, his triumphs, his very identity as a champion was not valid. And for a young man who had spent his life fighting to be seen, to be recognized, to be validated, this was a profound, personal affront. That cassette tape became more than just a recording of Holmes's words. It became a symbol. It became the soundtrack to Tyson's preparation. Each morning, as he listened to Holmes question his legitimacy, something inside him hardened. It wasn't just about winning the fight anymore. It was about proving Holmes wrong. It was about shutting down the argument, not with words, but with an undeniable, irrefutable performance. Think about that psychological warfare. Holmes was trying to get inside Tyson's head to fight. He was trying to plant seeds of doubt. He was trying to make Tyson question himself. But he succeeded in doing the exact opposite. He forged Tyson's resolve into something unbreakable. He gave Tyson a crystal clear objective: to silence the doubter, not with bravado, but with overwhelming force. This is where the lesson extends beyond the boxing ring. How often in life do we encounter criticism? How often are our efforts questioned by people who seem to have a higher standing, a more established background? It's easy to get defensive. It's easy to let the words sting and affect our performance. But sometimes, the most powerful response isn't to argue back. It's to channel that energy. To use the doubt as fuel. To let the criticism sharpen your focus. Larry Holmes made a critical error in judgment. He believed that by attacking Tyson's legitimacy, he could gain a mental advantage. He thought he could break Tyson's spirit before the bell. But he failed to grasp the fundamental nature of Tyson's drive. Tyson wasn't motivated by the desire for mere victory. He was motivated by the need for vindication. He needed to prove that his hard-won status was real. This is why the fight unfolded the way it did. Holmes tried his technical plan. He moved. He jabbed. He tried to control the distance. But he was fighting a version of Tyson that was fueled by something far more potent than mere competition. He was fighting a Tyson who had listened to his doubts every single morning. A Tyson who had internalized the challenge and was determined to answer it with overwhelming action. Tyson's body work in the early rounds was not just strategic. It was a form of psychological dismantling. By attacking Holmes's body, he was chipping away at his foundation. He was making it harder for Holmes to maintain the movement and the strategy he had planned. He was subtly reminding Holmes of the physical toll that sustained championship performance requires. And when Holmes landed his own punches, the ones that would have sent lesser men to the canvas, Tyson absorbed them. Not with the arrogance of invincibility, but with the quiet determination of someone who had trained for this. He had trained to endure. He had trained to overcome. He had trained to prove that the punches he absorbed were not a sign of weakness, but a testament to his resilience. The crowd's silence in the later rounds wasn't just about the one-sided nature of the fight. It was a collective realization. They were witnessing something extraordinary. They were seeing a man who had been dismissed, who had been doubted, not just fight, but they were seeing the confirmation of a legacy being forged in real time, in response to a direct challenge. Larry Holmes, a legend in his own right, had underestimated the power of a deeply personal grievance. He had thought he was engaging in a strategic battle of wits and skills. But he had inadvertently ignited a firestorm within his opponent. He had given Mike Tyson a reason, a deeply personal one, to deliver the most definitive answer possible. And that answer came in the fourth round. That precise, mechanically perfect right hand. It wasn't just a punch. It was the culmination of all those mornings listening to the tape. It was the embodiment of every doubt that had been cast upon him. It was the physical manifestation of his need to prove himself. Holmes's fall was dramatic, but his reaction afterward was even more telling. He wasn't just defeated. He was confronted with the stark reality of his miscalculation. He had underestimated the opponent. He had underestimated the power of a man whose entire life was a fight for recognition. This is a profound lesson for all of us. When someone challenges our worth, when they question our achievements, it's easy to get caught up in the anger, in the desire to prove them wrong in the moment. But sometimes, the most effective response is to internalize that challenge, to use it as a catalyst for deeper preparation, and to let our actions speak louder than their words. Larry Holmes was a great champion. He understood the game of boxing. But he missed a crucial element, the human element. He underestimated the psychological impact of his own words on a young fighter who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. He thought he was the storyteller, shaping the narrative. But in the end, Mike Tyson became the author of his own response. And what a response it was! It wasn't just a knockout. It was a statement. It was a refutation. It was the settling of an argument that had been simmering for months. It was the definitive answer to the question of whether Mike Tyson was a true champion. This fight is a reminder that words have power. They can build up, and they can tear down. They can motivate, and they can demoralize. Larry Holmes, in his attempt to reclaim his own legacy, inadvertently helped to solidify Mike Tyson's. He provided the spark, the specific reason that propelled Tyson to deliver a performance that would echo through the annals of boxing history. So, the next time someone doubts you, the next time someone questions your abilities, the next time someone tells you that what you've achieved isn't real, remember Larry Holmes and Mike Tyson. Remember the cassette tape. Remember the silent fury. Remember that sometimes, the most powerful way to respond is not with words, but with an undeniable, overwhelming demonstration of your own truth. Think about that. What is your cassette tape? What are the doubts that you've heard that have fueled your fire? Share your thoughts in the comments below. It's a powerful exercise to reflect on the moments that have tested us and ultimately made us stronger. This wasn't just a boxing match. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, unintended consequences, and the raw, unadulterated power of proving your worth when the world tells you you're not good enough. Larry Holmes, a man of immense boxing pedigree, made a gamble. He gambled on his ability to diminish his opponent's stature through rhetoric. He believed that by chipping away at Tyson's claim to the throne, he could gain a psychological edge. He thought he could make Tyson doubt himself. He thought he could dismantle the aura of invincibility with well-placed words. But he was playing with fire. He was poking a bear that had already been through more trials than most people could imagine. Mike Tyson's entire life was a testament to overcoming adversity. He had fought his way out of the darkest corners of life to reach the pinnacle of his sport. And for someone like Larry Holmes, a respected figure in the boxing world, to publicly declare his achievements as hollow was not just an insult. It was a profound disrespect to his struggle. It's like Holmes was trying to tell a survivor that their battle scars weren't earned, that their victory was a fluke. And for Tyson, who had built his entire identity on the foundation of proving his legitimacy, this was a challenge he couldn't ignore. The tape wasn't just background noise for Tyson. It was a daily affirmation of his mission. Every morning, he was reminded of the man who doubted him, the man who questioned his right to be where he was. And that wasn't demotivating. It was galvanizing. It was a clear call to action. It was a directive to deliver an answer that couldn't be debated. This is a crucial lesson. When we face doubt, when our efforts are questioned, it's easy to fall into despair or defensiveness. But the most successful people, the ones who truly leave a mark, are those who can take that criticism, that doubt, and transform it into fuel. They don't just ignore it, they internalize it and use it to drive them forward. Tyson's methodical approach in the ring was a direct result of this internal drive. He wasn't just looking for a knockout. He was dismantling Holmes' strategy piece by piece. He was cutting off the ring, controlling the pace, and systematically breaking down Holmes's ability to execute his game plan. This wasn't just power. It was precision, born from a deep understanding of his opponent and an even deeper understanding of his own purpose. The body work was particularly telling. It was a subtle, yet devastating, way of undermining Holmes's physical capabilities. It was like saying, "You want to talk about true champions? Let's see how you handle this." And as Holmes's movement slowed, as the punches to the body took their toll, the inevitability of the outcome became clearer. Even when Holmes landed his own shots, the ones that had ended so many previous fights, Tyson absorbed them. There was no flinch, no visible pain. It was a testament to his incredible resilience and his singular focus. He wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting to conquer. He was fighting to prove that the doubts cast upon him were baseless. And then came the moment. That perfectly timed right hand. It wasn't a wild swing. It was a calculated strike, delivered with surgical precision. It was the physical embodiment of Tyson's answer to Holmes's challenge. It was the definitive end to the argument. Holmes's reaction after the fight is also a powerful reminder. He wasn't just disappointed. He was confronted with the stark reality of his misjudgment. He had underestimated the opponent, not just in terms of skill, but in terms of the psychological fortitude that comes from a life of struggle. He had failed to realize that for Tyson, this wasn't just another fight. It was a validation. This story teaches us that true champions are not just born. They are forged. They are forged in the fires of adversity, in the crucible of doubt, and in the relentless pursuit of proving their worth. Larry Holmes, in his attempt to uphold a certain standard, inadvertently became a catalyst for Mike Tyson's most definitive statement. He gave Tyson the perfect adversary, the perfect platform to silence all his critics. So, as you go about your own lives, facing your own challenges, remember this story. When you encounter doubt, when your efforts are questioned, don't let it break you. Let it fuel you. Let it sharpen your focus. Let it drive you to deliver an answer that speaks for itself, an answer that leaves no room for debate. Because in the end, it's not about what others say about you. It's about what you do. It's about how you respond when challenged. It's about the unshakable belief in your own journey, your own earned legitimacy, and your own undeniable power to prove it. What are your thoughts on this incredible fight and the lessons it holds? Share them in the comments below. I'm eager to hear your perspectives. This is more than just a boxing story. It's a story about overcoming obstacles, about the power of conviction, and about the undeniable truth that some arguments are best settled not with words, but with action. And when the stakes are this high, the action speaks volumes.